Good morning. I'm Senator Wendy Harrison, and I represent Brattleboro and the rest of the Windham District. We're here this morning to discuss education. And the way I interact with education is through my committees. I'm on the Transportation Committee in the morning. I'm the clerk of that committee. I'm very happy to be on transportation. And in the afternoon, I am the chair of the Institutions Committee. And the Institutions Committee handles the bonding of the state. And the way I will likely be more involved in the education conversation is through potential funding of schools through bonding, which is something that the state did decades ago but hasn't done it in a very long time.
Also, regarding education, I am a licensed teacher. I've been an art teacher, and I work now doing occasional artist in residence programs in some of the local schools. So I have a definite interest and experience with the educational system.
Hi everyone, I'm Emily Kornheiser. We used to state rep for District 7, that's West Brattleboro. We used to do these meetings in the community room, and we all sat in a circle, and on this Saturday morning, all of us drove home through a really hairy blizzard last night, quite late, and so I just want to bring that spirit of a more casual vibe upstairs in a circle, looking at each other, being together on the Saturday morning. So I'm going to try for that, even though we're all in rows. So I was appointed the chair of the House Ways and Means Committee for my second biennium, and yesterday was elected chair of the Joint Fiscal Committee. In both of those roles, there's a lot of emphasis on both our education system and transformation related to our education system, very specifically how we pay for that education, and how we support strong communities and strong schools and our kids. And then also on some of the fiscal realities of preparing for the Trump administration or navigating the Trump administration. And so we might spend a moment today talking about that.
Good morning, everyone. Mark Spino, Superintendent of Schools, Windham Southeast.
Good morning. I'm Ann Beekman, Chair of the Windham Southeast Supervisory Union.
I'm Deborah Stanford. I am Chair of Windham School District and on the SU as well. I am a recently retired lifetime educator teaching a few years in the South Bronx public school system, and then decades at a private school, Horace Mann. Thank you.
And then I think we have a lot of Windham Southeast school staff in the room, teachers and otherwise. So can all the teachers and school staff in the room give a little hands in the air shout out, retired or otherwise? Thank you.
And as I said before, I'm Ian Goodnow, and I sit on House Judiciary, and I am the newest member of your delegation, which is why I'm probably going to be mostly emceeing this because I don't have as much to say. But we kind of wanted to start out with, I wanted to let Representative Kornheiser talk for a minute about how Montpelier is reacting to some of what we're hearing out of Washington and the federal administration. I think there's a lot of concern, and I just wanted to give her an opportunity to speak for a minute about that. I know that we're going to talk about education, but I think that's probably on top of mind for a lot of people given what we're reading in the news.
And I can talk about the fiscal piece of it, and then Senator Hashim can talk about some of the legal aspects of it. So during the previous Republican Trump administration, we did actually a lot of legal prep work about protecting medical professionals who might be providing gender-affirming care or reproductive care. We passed the Reproductive Liberty Amendment. We did a lot of work, and Senator Hashim can talk more about sort of the realities of a state law can only do so much in the face of national laws, but we did a lot of that prep work. And so if you don't hear a lot of noise about that, it's actually because we did a lot of it already, and that is great, and we are in a lot of ways as protected as we can be here. And more to say about that from Senator Hashim. So what we saw in the last week was a complete defunding of the states, right? And it's not clear if that was designed to just cause chaos or if it was designed towards a specific end. But the reality is that it both caused chaos and fear. There was essentially the complete stoppage of the flow of federal money to the states, and not just to state governments, but also to municipal governments, to nonprofit organizations, to domestic violence organizations, to hospitals for Medicaid reimbursements and Medicare reimbursements, to schools. The federal government funds a lot of things. And it also means that a lot of folks across the country are actually realizing what the government is for, sometimes for the first time. And so we're not, all of that, all those resources are flowing again because of court orders. But there is a lot, there's a lot to do to sort of prepare for that happening again. And what we're doing here in Vermont is the Treasurer's Office has sort of a task force that he's put in place to do preparations for that. And then at our Joint Fiscal Office and the Joint Fiscal Committee is working with the administration to essentially stress test all of our funds. We have some of the strongest reserves in the country. And actually just recently had a study commissioned to look at them and their strength a little more broadly. And then to start, frankly, evaluating if resources stop coming from the federal government, how will we need to shift funds in order to cover essential services? What will need to get paused and what won't need to get paused? And are we ready to have the flexibility for that to make sure we have the resources? It is frankly unclear right now how long the state could withstand that. Vermont gets significantly more resources from the federal government than we pay in taxes. And because of, frankly, the legacy of Patrick Leahy, Senator Leahy, we have benefited enormously from that. And our state has really built a lot on federal largesse. And so we are going to be carefully analyzing that in the coming weeks and months. And more is to come. There is no, I mean, none of us really quite know what to do right now, but I think the most important thing that we can be doing and that I can be telling all of you about is that we are doing contingency planning across sort of multiple modes and multiple strategies. And we'll keep on doing that and happy to talk about it further. And we're only, as someone just told me, we are only on day 10 here. And so really encourage folks, I'm doing my best to not panic because I can't do good work when I'm panicking, and to stay curious and stay connected and take care of my neighbors. So I'm going to pass it over to Nader.
All right, thank you. So, to the point that you had mentioned earlier, over the summer, some of the issues that I reached out to Legislative Counsel and the Attorney General's office was really, of the mindset of, if we have a Trump presidency, what can we as the legislature do to protect Vermonters, and what is in our capabilities? And as was mentioned, there are some things we can do and other things that we can't do. And thankfully, we did take a lot of steps over the last several years to safeguard some of the things that we find especially important in this state. For example, I believe I saw the headline just last night that there is a doctor in New York who is, who I believe Louisiana is trying to get him extradited because he provided, I think Plan B essentially to somebody who was from Louisiana. And so what we did last year was essentially creating safeguards for the confidentiality of information for medical providers and people who come to Vermont or are visiting Vermont and accessing reproductive health care, so that information is much more protected from other states who may seek to extradite Vermont medical providers. Now, on the other hand, when it comes to federal law, when there are federal investigations happening, we are not able to impede that investigation, but there are certain things that we don't necessarily have to share voluntarily with the federal government. So it's walking that fine line of, do we actively participate in some federal investigations, whether it's for immigration or reproductive health care, or do we just not participate, but not in such a way that it's impeding, so that people don't get arrested for felonies, federal felonies for impeding an investigation. So that's kind of the high level outlook of what we can do and what we can't do. So yeah, I'll leave it there for now.
And I want to give everyone an opportunity to ask questions on that, but we have some guest speakers who need to leave earlier than the end of the session today. So I want to get to education now, and then we can field questions about this really important topic, or actually just anything that's happening in the legislature, because there's a lot happening up there near the end. But I want to pass it back to Emily to speak for a minute on what do we hear generally on the 22nd of January from the administration about their plan, and where is it in the process right now?
Thanks. So our schools have been under tremendous pressure for a number of years. I mean, for decades, yes, but also, particularly through COVID, through the slow underfunding from the federal government, through some of the underfunding of our human services providers. So our schools have been under pressure for a tremendously long time. And as we know, last year, the pressure on our schools led to much higher budgets being warned throughout the state and voted on. And a remarkable number of school budgets failed because communities weren't willing or able to pay those tax rates. Here in Brattleboro, in Windham Southeast, we passed our school budget quite successfully, I would say, and it was a responsible school budget. And I'll also tell you that most of those other school budgets all over the state that failed were also responsible school budgets. But we have a system for funding our schools that has a tremendous amount of instability built into it, because it is dependent on varied revenue sources, and because there is a very strong relationship between spending and tax rates, but not a direct enough relationship for folks to really understand it. And so that instability in how we pay for our schools led to a real tremendous challenges across the state. It led to teachers needing to go out and, instead of being in their classrooms teaching, asking their community members to fund their jobs. It led to kids feeling like their communities didn't believe in them and believe in the schools they went to. And it also led to a lot of people really, really struggling to pay their property tax bills, right? Myself included. And so that experience that we all had last year, and frankly, the expectation that given all of the pressures on our schools and the same fiscal reality being before us, meaning that likely property taxes are not projected to go down this year, they are projected to go up. We all entered this legislative biennium saying we need to do something to change this. And what this is very, very complex. And the legislature, as you might know, is a part-time legislature. We are there 4 days a week, 4 months out of the year. We have very limited staff, and our job is not actually to do planning or administration. Our job is or administer laws. Our job is to debate and create the enabling environment for actions to happen via passing laws. And so after a lot of conversations with the Commission on the Future of Public Education, and a few other, and a new Secretary of Education who came in under some fairly wild circumstances. The administration put forward the broad outline of a proposal to make changes this January. And the broad outline of that proposal was a significant change in governance, moving to much larger school districts. What they put forward is 5. There's talk amongst them of 12, but a much broader governance structure, much larger school districts. A change in how we fund our public education system, so that we would be moving to a specific amount of dollars going to each school district each year based on the number of students that they have and the characteristics of those students, demographics, rather than the system we have now where districts debate a budget, pass a budget, and then that gets funded at the state level, at whatever level that community passed. And then significant changes in how schools are supported from the agency, how districts are supported from the agency. So a real change in administration. And some of that is related to quality. We have had fairly lovely education quality standards for quite a long time, but the Agency of Education has not done much to support those quality standards happening in our schools. And a lot of other aspects of that. So sort of a change in administration and support, a change in governance, and a huge change in how we pay for that. The details really matter, right? They matter for our kids, and they matter for our schools, and they matter for our communities, staying strong and vibrant in the face of a lot happening at the federal level and all over the world. And so right now, we are, as a legislature, doing, every committee in the House, and I believe many committees in the Senate, are diving into this, diving into their piece of the puzzle. But specifically, the House Ways and Means Committee and the Senate Finance Committee and the House and Senate Education Committees are spending the bulk of our time trying to understand the administration's proposal, trying to understand the timeline for that proposal, and how transformation would happen, and trying to understand how each of our communities might experience those changes. We're doing that in really strong partnership with the Superintendents Association and the School Boards Association and the Teachers Association and the Principals Association, and we're really doing our very best to invite practitioners from all of those groups into committee rooms to be part of that process as well. Right now, we really don't have very many details. And a lot of the details that we have received, frankly, don't quite line up with each other. And so what we're needing is like statutory language and a really meaningful work plan that the agency is proposing in order to really understand what would happen to each of our communities. So I'm not here to speak for the administration today. I'm not here to either put forward or defend a proposal. But it's really important that our communities start thinking about just even how change might feel, and what, getting clear on what I've been really encouraging my committee and all the committees that I've had joint hearings with and our whole House caucus to really just get curious and get clear what our questions are before we even start talking about what the answers might be. And so that's sort of the frame that I'm hoping we can bring to this conversation today. This is not the only time we're going to have this conversation. Hoping to do it really regularly, might start sort of a series separate from our usual legislative delegation meetings in order to keep on connecting on this. But that's sort of where we are. So I would love to just sort of pass the mic to folks who know a lot more about schools than I do, to really just, and I know that no one warned you about giving a speech, so I'm just asking you to be like, what are the values that you think we need to be thinking about or questions we need to be asking as we tackle the next few years?
Yeah, I definitely don't have a speech prepared for this morning. And I don't have a lot of answers. So there's incredible lack of details in the current proposal that has been shared with the state of Vermont. What I will say, I'm very proud of our school system, our school district. We've prepared a budget to propose in March with a 1% increase. I think that's a remarkable work of the school board and the administration in collaboration with our school communities. We're focused on building systems and supporting our students. That's our primary focus. I try not to get caught up in politics as part of the job, but what I am most focused on is supporting all of our students in our schools, and that's the work that I focus on day in and day out, and I try to have that at the center of the table in conversations at board meetings, and I know our board members feel the same way.
I guess I have a question that I'd like you to ask administration. In light of the fact that the AOE has not and possibly cannot show any savings from the merger that we've already done, why would completely bombing our schools system save any money? It has been my experience with merger, and I have served as a school director since 2013, that we have hired more people to run a larger administration because, frankly, we need more people to do the darn job of managing all of the schools in our district. We keep getting handed more requirements and rules. Well, somebody has to pay attention to that. Somebody has to come up with a way to collect the data. Somebody has to collect the actual data, and somebody has to analyze the data. So, given our governor's lack of support for public schools and his support of an all-voucher system, do we really think that this is in any way intended to make things better? Because I doubt that it is.
I'm not even sure what my questions are. The plan is so broad and so sweeping. I'm grateful for this conversation and for this gathering. I do hope that there can be reciprocity. The school board is organizing, I'm going to put this out, a special meeting on Monday, February 24 at 6 p.m. So everyone, please save that date, Monday, February 24 at 6 p.m. in order to continue this conversation so that school board members, personnel in the district, community members can better understand this so-called proposed plan. And proposed makes me nervous, considering the implementation is supposed to begin in 2026. I would think proposed gives us a little more time to better consider the commission's findings and actually to do more in-depth work with community than the listen and learn tours as they have been organized. I find them lacking.
And just as a point of interest, I have the recently approved budget right in front of me. Unless you live in Dummerston, your taxes are projected to go down. Not a lot, but down.
I think one of the, yeah, I'll pass to you 1 second. I think one of the interesting pieces of doing this work as a legislator is the balance between representing our community, which might be all 3 districts or the region or just my little neighborhood in West Brattleboro, and the fact that we are passing laws that impact the whole state. And every legislator works that balance differently, and it's a really hard balance. And one of the things we've been talking a lot about as a caucus is what do all the kids in our state need? And I remember when we were talking about mergers, there was a lot of conversations about, you know, we need the kids and the parents in Dummerston, families in Dummerston to care about the kids in Brattleboro, right? And we need the kids in Brattleboro to care about the kids in Dummerston. And now we're talking about the whole state. And I want to be really clear, like, we have an amazing school board and superintendent and schools here, and there are districts in this state that are profoundly underfunded right now. And I think if a court case was brought today, and we just had a panel about the Brigham decision at the State House on Thursday night, it is very likely that our current system would be declared unconstitutional given the massive inequities in opportunity that we do have in this state right now. And so I think as we do our work, we have massive inequities in how property taxes are levied right now, but even more so, we really have massive inequities in opportunity throughout the state. And that's not okay for me, and I hope it's not okay for you all either. And so as we all do our work, we're really balancing, like, knowing that we're pretty good here, we're pretty stable. I'm sure you all would like a little more help from the Agency of Education like you used to get, but we need to think about all of our kids too.
So I wanted to just highlight, in the Senate Education Committee, we don't really, we learn about the finances, but it is the Finance Committee that handles that. In Senate Education, we look more at the day-to-day, the logistics of how schools are operating, how districts are operating, governance structures, and so on. And over the last month, it's been, as has already been described, it's just been kind of these broad proposals. We have been able to pry out some details here and there. And also don't shoot the messenger, I'm just representing what I've heard in the governor's proposal. The proposal discusses reducing the districts from 119 to 5 with the idea that under this plan, no schools are going to close. That's what has been represented to us. And however, on the flip side of that, we have coincidentally been getting a whole lot of testimony from private schools. And so, I can't help but wonder, why are we getting all of that testimony, and also talking about the moratorium that prohibits the opening of new private schools. So perhaps I'm maybe a little suspicious, but what I genuinely worry about is just a dramatic increase in the privatization of public education. That's my concern. The other issue that I have, the concern that I have about the consolidation of districts is the lack of connection. If there is, one central office, let's say in White River Junction, what do they necessarily know about what's going on in a small school in Marlboro or Guilford? So that's another red flag that I'm keeping an eye on as well. Their budget also involves eliminating universal school meals, which is something I fought very hard for, so that's just a non-starter for me. And when asked about the transition plan, they described a 2-year transition plan for this, and also stated that there may be some areas that would be expedited under this transition plan, but didn't provide any further details on that. Now, the really frustrating part is that we've got about a month, maybe a month and a half until we get to crossover, which is when Senate bills go to the House and House bills come to the Senate. So we have about that much time for the Senate Education Committee to work on whatever details come from the administration. And that is an extremely short amount of time to completely revamp how we deliver education in the state. So that's just my own little rant there. One of the other components of this is, they discuss that there will be cost savings by reducing the districts, but also by being able to share staff, teachers, and contracts between schools more easily. And that is something that I think is a good idea. We did pass a bill last year. It was called the BOCES bill. It's the Board of Collaborative Education. And basically it allows different districts to partner with another district to share staff and share contracts. And so that was meant to be one step that And so, that is one of the pros I would describe from what I've seen in this proposal so far, at least. But that's my initial take on all of this. Will you? Oh.
Yeah, hi. I'd just like to sort of supplement the kind of pressure that we legislators are under to do something because, as you know, it wasn't so bad in Brattleboro, but taxes rose in some communities by double digits. And the governor blamed the legislature for doing what we needed to do. What we'd always done is cover all the taxes, all the school budgets that came in, and we had to cover them, and we found ways to lower what the tax rate was going to be. And it was a very challenging situation, but the governor went around saying that the legislature raised property taxes, which was not true. And so a lot of people, a lot of really good legislators lost their seats over this. And so this is the political thing that we're facing is people, we need to do something to lower property taxes. What's that going to be? And then it's interesting that in the governor's address recently, he said, yeah, school budgets, all of school budgets come in and then we have to cover that money. So he completely, what he had been saying in the spring after we passed this bill, that the legislature raised your property taxes. So that was just sort of an interesting little situation. So I just wanted to sort of lay that out, is that's the political situation that we're in too, is how do we navigate this particular issue and help our schools at the same time.
Okay, so you've heard from all of us. So I wanted to give an opportunity. We want to give an opportunity for you all to chime in. I think questions are great, and if you want to, you have thoughts about what's going on, and you want us to ask questions of the administration. Clearly, the discussion right now is there's a lot to be learned still. So we're not probably going to have all the answers, but hearing where people are concerned is really helpful for us as we move forward. So I see a hand from Frick, and I see Molly Stoner. Okay, I will run them around. So Frick first. I got it.
Thank you. Welcome to the legislature, neighbor. A couple things. One is some of you are really good at sharing emails with updates. I would encourage all of you to get all of your constituents' email addresses and push back. I mean, I'm talking not just to you guys, but to the entire legislature. There are more of you than governors, and you have the opportunity to really change the conversation if you want to. I know it's a lot of work. I am wondering why the governor is driving the bus. I'm a little worried about that on this situation, rather than you guys, since you guys are the legislature. You don't need to go into detail right now if you don't want to, but I'm curious about that. Yesterday I was dealing with one of the local refugee agencies, ECDC, and they lost half their staff this week. I don't know that the legislature is in a position to help make up the difference, but I just wanted to shine a light on that, especially since we're being broadcast, so that the whole community knows that that has happened, and maybe there are people who would be able to contribute either time or money. I was contributing furniture yesterday, which was a win-win from my perspective. But we have two wonderful refugee agencies in town, one of which got government funding, the other one didn't. One of which has been dealing with what for the moment are considered legal refugees, although they're Native Americans who are getting swept up in the ICE raids. Which brings up the other question. It seems like ICE has been making many illegal arrests, because as I understand, being here without documentation is a civil, not a criminal offense. So I guess my question, especially maybe for Nader, is what can or will the state do to push back on that including possibly arresting ICE agents who are coloring outside the lines.
Can we hold that question? Can we focus on education just for the beginning of the meeting? The way we planned? Okay,
Okay, do you want to try, no, okay, so I'm going to hand it over to
Hi.
And if you want to just say your name and where you're from, that's very helpful.
That's what I was just going to do. I was going to go down the list and say who all those people were who spoke. My name is Molly Stoner. I'm a Dummerston resident and a Putney teacher and a member of Vermont NEA's political ed action team. So just to be transparent. I came with 3 questions, 2 of which you have already addressed. So thank you, Emily, for bringing up Brigham. That's a concern of mine and something that I hope stays on the table as a really important issue. Nader, thank you for bringing up crossover. I also have been looking at the timeline and thinking this is insane to be thinking about making decisions of this size in 6 weeks. So good luck. We are in an insane environment, so I just want to, really honor what you've all said about the pressure you're under and the time frame. The thing I haven't heard yet is a concern I have, or I guess it's a question I have, a recognition I have about the intersection of healthcare costs with education funding. And in my role on Vermont NEA's political ed action team, we talk a lot about I don't have it in my head right now, but the team that VisVit members are part of, and I know Mike Campbell is the NEA rep, that's looking into healthcare costs. And I am pretty sure the number that they saw as saving by using reference-based fees in hospitals is like 400 million in savings. And I listened to the secretary of the agency presenting online last night and from a couple days ago, and the savings of the governor's plan are projected to be 183 million. So that is less than half of what the healthcare savings could be. I know as educators, our increase last year was, I believe, 17%. This year it's 11.9%. So for, Mark Spino to say he's proposed, the board is putting forth a 1% increase, please recognize that that means significant cuts because all those teachers have an 11.9% healthcare cost increase. And that's paid by the board at the 80% level. We individually pay 20%. So it's also eating our increases of salary. So I just want to put those numbers out there that the intersectionality of healthcare costs and education funding is massive. And I want to encourage you all to think about what can happen about that as you move forward. And something that Molly said also inspired this, Molly. When you were talking about property taxes, I was also thinking about asking to say, please keep alive the idea of a different method of funding, like income funding. So thank you very much.
Emily wants to respond to that.
I'd love to speak to the healthcare question. So a move to reference-based pricing was both a suggestion of the body that negotiates healthcare costs for teachers, and a recommendation of a massive study that was commissioned by the Green Mountain Care Board and the legislature about the health of our hospitals, and both recommended reference-based pricing. And our healthcare committee is taking testimony on that. Our healthcare system right now is probably just as fragile as our education system. And so there's a lot of trepidation that further changes could further destabilize in this moment. And there's a lot of opportunity in the reference-based pricing as well. The governor's team's modeling that I think Nader had in his packet in his hand does not take into account the massive growth in healthcare costs year over year. It just has a standard inflator built into it. And I'm giving that somewhat minutia piece of detail because one of my concerns doing this work is as we dig into the numbers, a lot of them might be, they are built, some of them are built on some really incredible, like nationally prestigious, evidence-based, fantastic policy work. But the assumptions in them often are not lined up with the reality of either our current school system or even a future school system that we would all want to be living in. And so as we dig in and fix those assumptions, like the actual cost of healthcare and the growth in the cost of healthcare, the numbers that were presented to us are likely going to go up, not because of any even policy changes that we're making, but just because we're frankly fixing mistakes in the math. And that creates quite a political firestorm, as well as just changes the decisions that are in front of us on the table. I just want to say again, these conversations are really scary, and all of what everyone said about the timeline and distrust for the administration, that's all very real. I also just want to name, we actually can't keep on going on the way that we're going either. And so the world is changing, and we are changing with it, and we can't prevent that change. We need to manage that change. And so some decisions are going to be in front of us. I just want to make sure that we are making the right decisions and asking the right questions.
Do I have to do something to make it go? It's on now. Okay. Sure. I'm Ellen Schwartz. I live in District 8 in Brattleboro, and I am a retired teacher and just a concerned Brattleboro resident. And I mostly have concerns, and some of them will echo things you've already said. So one of them is about moving to this plan for the 5 school districts, that the further decision-making goes, this is with my educator hat on, the further decision-making is from the actual children and families who are impacted, the less likely it is to actually meet the needs. And I think somebody on the panel has already brought that up, that I taught in Massachusetts for many years. A lot of decisions came down from Boston and really were difficult to implement in small rural towns in the western part of the state. The second is also something that's brought up, which is, I think if we're talking about data and paying attention to data, look at whether consolidation has actually reduced costs, because I don't see any evidence either in schools or healthcare, where a lot of the cost drivers in healthcare have to do with the consolidation by the UVM health network. And so if consolidation isn't reducing costs, then maybe look at what are the actual cost drivers, like what Molly brought up, the cost of healthcare. It's not the only one, but it's one of them. And if we're not looking at the actual cost drivers, we can implement all these changes, and then, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, say, oh, the costs are still going up. That's what's happened with healthcare. We implemented one care, and now it's like, oh, that didn't work, so we'll do something else. Maybe another one of these meetings will be about healthcare, and I can get into that more. The other thing, I was very happy, Nader, to hear you raise those concerns about private money, public money going to private schools. And that you're actively working against that. And I think the consolidation could increase that, because even though they're saying they're not going to close schools, I have some doubt about whether, if they're trying to save money, whether they would be closing particularly small schools, which would then mean that wouldn't affect Brattleboro so much, but some of the other smaller communities, kids would have very long bus rides, which is not good for kids. And so the impetus to then allow people in those communities to tuition on public money to tuition their kids to private schools would be great. It already happens in schools communities that don't have a high school. And then the last thing I want to say is just related to the tax issue, that I think that as with the costs, like looking at really what the costs are, the problem with the taxes is that we rely, in my opinion, that we rely too much on regressive taxes, one of which is the property tax, but it's not the only one. And that if we don't, I know it's a lot of work, and you guys don't have the time in your compressed schedule, but if we're not actually willing to tackle the underlying problem, we're going to be back at this table trying to figure out again, how do we fund public education and all the other things we need, our highway department, everything that we use public money for. How are we going to do that without making the state unaffordable for people? And the only way, in my opinion, to change the tax structure is to actually get away from regressive taxes so that those people who are working for a living or retired workers aren't carrying the tax burden for those folks who are, have a lot more money than we do.
Michael Bosworth, West Brattleboro District. I have a question. I heard the commission mentioned once this morning. My reading from last year says commission coming out of the legislature that would study the whole system. So I'd like to know, get clarity, is the commission already starting their work? Is it completely separate from what the administration is working on? Or are they working together? Or are you waiting to see how the governor's plan plays out? Or just more clarity on that?
The Commission on the Future of Public Education began its work, I don't know, maybe in August, and appointed a subcommittee that they were required to appoint in statute, which is an education finance subcommittee, and I chaired that. The members of the commission are the who come from the legislature are the chair of the Senate Finance Committee and the chair of the House Education Committee. And they are actually meeting this Monday. If anyone wants to tune in, you can find the link on the Agency of Education website somewhere deeply buried. It's a hard website to navigate, which I don't think is entirely the fault of the Agency of Education. But so they have been meeting and doing pretty incredibly deliberative work, and have been trying to meet in every region of the state as they're required to under statute, with significant public input sessions as well. They delivered a interim report on December 19th or so that laid out what might in passing seem like just an introductory remark, but was actually a very significant finding or recommendation. And that is that education finance reform cannot happen in isolation. It needs to happen in alignment with governance and significant administrative support and a real attention on kids. That all of those things are deeply interconnected. That was sort of their major finding. And now they are sort of shifting their work, and also a really pretty extensive list of both all of the cost drivers and all of the different opportunities that might make a difference on both costs and education quality. That's a list of about 40 things. They're all deeply interconnected with each other, and very, very few of them would see any returns in either quality or fiscal savings for at least 5 years after passage. So it's a long time frame we're talking about from those ideas, and a deeply interconnected system from the recommendation. We asked the secretary about how the planning that the Agency of Education had been doing might align with the commission's work, as well as she set up these policy, they're not called tiger teams, they're called like speed teams or action teams. Do you remember what they're doing? Okay. They had sprint teams. Thank you, Dora. She set up these sprint teams that seemed to me to be fairly parallel to what the commission should be offering. And so asked in testimony how those things align. And that is going to be the conversation at the commission meeting on Monday. And so I can report back on that. It's really important that we both to respect the time of the professionals that are on the commission that have committed themselves to doing this really important work, but also to make sure that all of our legislative processes are really deeply informed by the field and by Vermonters, really trying very hard to continue to loop back to the commission to be getting feedback as we do our work.
Thank you. I'm Cheryl Charles, and I actually chair the Westminster School Board and chair the Wyndham Northeast Supervisory Union Board. But I came here today because I was invited by a group of rural communities to make some statements about what's at risk for our rural schools in the state. But let me reinforce a couple of things I've already heard. Ann Beekman's comment about look for the evidence. Where is the evidence that Is going to save us money. We went through the whole Act 46 thing. I've been a school board member for 9 years, so I lived through Act 46 and forced mergers and all of that. And we keep asking for the evidence, and we don't have it. We actually have some counter evidence that shows that those merged districts are spending at a higher rate than those that are still locally controlled and independent. So we're asking you, question the assumptions, look for the evidence, please. And don't let something so dramatic as 5 school districts in the whole state occur without really a rigorous analysis. It's just essential. And that proposal, by the way, dissolves all the local school boards. Think about what that actually means. So I'm representing a new group that's being formed, a Rural School Community Alliance, and already in just 2 weeks, we've got more than 50 school districts throughout the state and select boards coming together, and it will grow. And we're going to continually look for the evidence and look for the guiding principles. And one of those is to say, to support democratic decision-making at the local level. Don't be imposing implementation of changes without really hearing from the public in order to look for those cost-effective, high-quality, equitable ways to improve schooling. Look for a process where one of the things in the governor's proposal, and let me say, we're looking at it and looking for things we can support. This is not just to be against. We're perfectly happy to look for good ideas. But one of those is talking about right-sizing the schools. So what does that mean? And one of the numbers floated around is any school of 125 students or less would be subject to closure. How many does that affect where many of our students live? And then what happens? Back to something Ellen was talking about, the buses and the potential for long bus rides. So we're looking for a process, and we're looking for a way to support schools that might be at risk. And there are ways to combine classes. There are ways to be innovative to make sure that those kinds of things can be addressed properly. And as people have been saying, look for the cost drivers. Look for those things that are in the education fund now, but probably ought not to be there, whether it's pensions, school mental health service costs. I'm another big supporter of the universal schools, in-school meals, and yet we're paying for that out of the education fund. So let's look at these cost drivers that are impacting people, and to consider looking at an income-based school tax formula, which I think has already been discussed here. So this group, this new alliance of especially rural schools, but we're certainly happy to have the larger population schools help us as well, will be coming up with evidence-based proposals for everybody's consideration, and we'll stay in close touch with everyone. One last comment I would make. The governor has said often that there are double-digit increases in both homestead property taxes and in school budgets. Our schools, for the most part, in southern Vermont, in Windham County, have not done that. We've got no double-digit increases in Windham Northeast. And we have budgets, like I heard here, actually going down slightly. So be careful of those sweeping statements that are made that are so damaging to the quality of education that currently exists in the state. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'll just respond real quickly. Thank you, Cheryl. I did just want to reemphasize that with what we've received so far, there isn't a proposal to close schools. That's what we've been told explicitly in the paperwork that we've been given. However, I don't know if there will be policy ideas proposed in the next couple of weeks that do propose the possibility of closing schools. It's possible. I don't know because we still haven't received those details yet.
I wanted to reinforce the message from a number of people. Dave Scholes from Brattleboro. No, okay. I'm Dave Scholes from Brattleboro. 40 years of engagement with the Vermont school system and 14 years as a school board member. And I wanted to just reinforce the importance of pushing back on the pressure that you're getting. If you remember, and it's probably hard to remember, because all the flurry of activity. But last year, what you were hearing from superintendents, principals, teachers, if anybody asked the students, you hear the same thing. There's too much instability. There's too much changing, too much going on right now. Give us at least take 1 year off and don't pass a big education bill. Don't give us more change. We did consolidation. Weighting bills need to be, the weights need to be examined and make sure that they're being applied effectively. And the special ed bill has caused an incredible amount of turmoil and additional costs to school districts, to taxpayers. So just fight back on that pressure. Push back the way he does. He talked about if they consolidated the medical, negotiations around medical insurance, that would save $75 million. That was his promise. Instead, it's had over 3 years more than 40% increase in those premiums. So he's full of it, and he's pushing you. And just take your time, go really slowly. I've been watching all of these meetings, and I get to do it on the weekends and after dinner while you guys are doing it all day long. And there's really some great questions. And there's some really shit information coming from the experts that the governor has called in. And fortunately, the committee members are pushing back on it. But it's not, Cheryl talked about accurate information. That's not what's being presented. It's estimations, approximations, and median, and not really good data.
Mary Della Priori, District 8, and it's great hearing from all the professionals, and I love how smart Vermonters are. This is encouraging. I'm a mother of 6, and so I want to ask you, you've mentioned over again the quality of our education. How do you assess that? How do you assess the quality of, BUHS? I have a high schooler now. Is it accredited? Do you use an outside agency? We're talking about a lot of money. In Brattleboro, our education tax went up 14.2%. That is double digits. So when you're talking about this money, which is why the 1%, which I truly appreciate, it's like, that's great, but it just went up 14.2. So, it wasn't like overwhelmingly great since we took such a big hit the previous year. So what are we paying for? How do you assess that it's quality education? Because I want a quality education for my child so they can go out into the world and compete appropriately. And with that in mind, why are you so against some sort of voucher program, or for people who homeschool, giving them some money? Now, I understand money's tight, but if we care about the children first, and we know that one solution doesn't fit all children, why are we so narrow in this approach? That's it.
Yeah, I can speak to the quality education a bit. This is something that we get information about. We get the NEAP scores, or NAEP, and I don't want to put our colleagues on the spot, but the professionals who are in education on a regular basis, they might be able to speak more specifically about how education quality is gauged. Regarding the vouchers, there certainly are situations where, for example, therapeutic schools are wonderful places where, there are students who need to go to a school like that. The Kindle Farm is the first one that comes to mind. So in my opinion, it's not a black and white situation. And that's why I think that ideally it would be great if we had more time to look at specifically, how we're navigating this. I think that with the moratorium, what I would support is allowing the creation of more therapeutic schools, which are considered approved independent schools. But it's, going beyond that, I think is going to be a huge challenge in the legislature because there are a lot of strong feelings on both sides of that conversation.
The problem with funding private schools is that it defunds public schools. This year, we are spending $3,111,984 on outside placements. Now, please understand that those outside placements are 100% necessary. The students that are getting these are students who have great needs. But that's $3,111,984 that will not be going into our regular schools. I'd also like to point out that no matter what the agency or the administration say the decisions about Act 46 and this current move are based on recommendations from the Pikus-Odden report, which recommends elementary schools have a minimum of 400 students. So don't think it don't affect Brattleboro, because that is every elementary school in our district, every single one of them.
Thank you all for coming here, especially. A lot of you know me, some of you don't. I'm a street minister. I am essentially a Buddhist street minister under the auspices of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. I don't necessarily like the idea of name dropping, but that's my main impetus out of college. Amherst College, by the way, 1979 with honors. What I'd like to say is, generally speaking, my focus is on the homeless and the drug addicted and the relationship with the town and the police. But I'm going to leave that alone right now because I've also been involved pretty heavily in education. I was a teacher's assistant in a private school for very, very disturbed teenage men. The name of the school it's in Wendell, Mass, and there are two of them. I don't want to talk about names here. I may get myself into actual legal trouble because I don't have nice things to say about these places. But let me just say here that I understand very, very well, having actually run a lot of group homes. I was always at the of social change, and when Massachusetts shut down two entire systems of institutionalization, one of them being, they had two systems, one for mental retardation, as they called it, which is now an epithet, we don't use it, and one for MR system and the MH system in Mass many years ago in the 80s. We shut down Belchertown State School, which was a hellhole, and we shut down Northampton State Hospital, which was also a hellhole. There was nothing but abuse going on in these places, and the judge shut them down. We said, we ordered them put into the community, and I was one of the first people to put these people into group homes and reintroduce them into regular life and human life. Thank you very much after many, many years of abuse. What I'd like to say is that I hear a lot of, so I understand the complications of applying generic rules to situations. I understand the complications of government because I've experienced it in the microcosm, and I understand it's very difficult to apply generic rules to everybody. And of course, here we're specifically talking about the legislature against, and not against, but versus in a way small towns and their own individual and very specific needs, like snowflakes. Everyone's individual. This is a very difficult, as you've all put it, a very, very difficult knife edge to navigate. And I'm almost in tears thinking about how the good that you folks do and that we do here in this conversation. I thank you all for the hard work you do. It's extremely stressful. I've been there in a microcosm, but I understand the basic principles. So what I want to say very quickly is that if we lose sight of the basic principles, the children are our future. We used to be kids. Everyone here was an 11-year-old at one point, okay? Should we be running the world as 11-year-olds? No. Should we be running the world as 11-year-olds who are abused, 11-year-olds who are abused, and then we have issues? Should we be positions of power instead of helping people actually enforcing, using those issues in a bad way? In other words, wounded healer is fine. I am one. But let's keep it straight. Let's keep it simple. So think about these core values. The children are our future. They're human beings. If they don't eat, they can't learn. That's been scientifically proven. There's enough evidence. We already know that, okay? If you're hungry, you're going to be thinking about food. You're not going to be thinking about what the teacher's telling you, okay? If we take that core, simple statement, the children are our future, they are us, what could be possibly more important? So, okay, I'm a Marxist, okay? I see the whole thing is interconnected. The problem being that the incredible gap, which is now increasing between the rich and the poor. Well, I went to a private school.
Let me address this very specifically. My parents were very greedy people. They were both doctors, but they came from a greedy culture. They decided, since they had worked so hard and they were making $100,000 a year in the 80s, which is like $1 million now when the rest of the neighborhood wasn't, okay? I was told very specifically, you are a part of the elite. You will go to Roxbury Latin School. We will pay thousands and thousands of dollars for you to go to the second oldest school in the country. And we don't want to pay our taxes on that. We don't want to pay for public kids. We're spending thousands of dollars. We earn that money. Why should we pay for public kids? And I used to get mad at them. I said, well, because, hello? Because you have the money and the ability to do that, period. Because they're your kids. They're all our kids. We all share them. The tribe, I'm very tribal. I'm adopted into the Blackfeet Nation in Browning, Montana, literally. And the tribe raises the children. Okay? So if we take these simple, core, like words like compassion, for example. Okay, well, that's a big word. It means that you don't want someone to suffer, period. Well, I don't want that kid to be hungry in school. I wasn't. But boy, did I disagree with my parents when they told me I'm not paying taxes for public schools. Why should I? If you don't know why you should do that, then maybe you're not a very good doctor. What about that hypocritical oath, okay? And I'm going to leave it at that. But let's take these things from this simple basis and look at them that way. And yes, it's complicated. Of course it is. It's extremely complicated to have Burlington and the governor, you know, basically, and if you don't mind me saying, go crapping on people who want to raise taxes. And no consolidation does not save money. It increases the money. You've got to bus kids. That costs money. You're polluting the environment with the buses. So I'm going to leave it at that. Let's keep it simple. Let's work it from the bottom up. And let's take the complicated stuff and arrange it according to the simplicity of our basic moral values.
Thank you. I just want to give everyone an opportunity to speak.
Hi, I'm David Eastman. My back's bothering me, so I'm not going to stand up. I'm from Guilford. I have a simple question, I hope. But before I do, I want to second some of the things that have been said here of the importance of public education being funded by the public. Let private education fund itself. I'm a subject of private education, and my parents paid for both the public education in my district as well as my own. So we were fortunate enough to be able to do that. And the other is regressive versus progressive taxes. I was on a school board for 5 years in rural upstate New York, and you know the issues of, you know, when he said it was a 1% increase, I thought, what the hell was cut? Because I know the costs didn't just increase 1% over a year. But my simple question is, does the governor's proposal take legislative endorsement, or can he execute it without the legislature approving?
The legislator has to be involved. That's like the one I can
So
actually answer.
tell him to get his facts straight and his proposals clear.
Great, yeah, no, appreciate it.
Don't make it your job to figure do his job.
Yes, we have a hand here first, and I see your hand. I want to make sure everyone gets an opportunity to speak.
Thank you, and George Carville, West Brattleboro. There'll be a lot of yardsticks applied to that, and maybe this one's too early, but has anybody taken the formula that they have that starts with $13,000 a student and runs it through the other adds and subtracts? Can you tell me what the per pupil, it's a donation from the state, what the per pupil amount from the state we'd expect to get against what the per pupil amount is where we have today?
The agency has not done the math to clarify what would happen at the district level, and have not yet provided enough of their modeling background in order for our joint fiscal office to do that yet. Yes. While I have the mic, I just, and we only have a few minutes left, I hope that in my 6 years in office, I have more than proved to this community that I care deeply about progressive taxation. It is what I have dedicated all of my work in the legislature to doing. I also want to, and I said this at our previous meeting a month ago and the one before that, I just want to be really clear. We are operating in a fully divided government in Vermont right now. And so we all up here need to navigate that, and we need you to know that we need to navigate that. We are absolutely going to be up there doing the very best we can and holding true to our values. And we cannot override vetoes anymore. And at the end of the day, at the end of this session, before anyone can go home, before government can be funded, we need to pass a budget and we need to pass a yield bill. That's how our schools are paid for. Those two bills must pass in order for any of the state level resources to flow. And that is absolutely our governance obligation regardless of party. And that is the end game that I am very mindful of as we start these conversations and as we're moving through these conversations. And so I just want to be as realistic as possible and I feel like a little bit of a wave of shame, just like laying out the reality for you all instead of just like jumping into the political idealism that is frankly more comfortable. But that's what we're gonna need to be doing this year. And we're doing that this year because we didn't organize well enough last year, right? And so I really just hope that folks can stay at this table, but don't just talk to us if you have all of the thoughts that you have shared today, but that you call the governor's office and you talk to your friends in other communities, and that you just, stay engaged beyond just this room. Thanks.
All right, we got one hand there, and then the last comments.
Okay. My name is Jim Hildebrand, District 7. Fairly new to the Brattleboro community, but I've lived in Vermont for many decades. I'm a retired public school teacher. So I'm really intensely tuned into this whole discussion. And it's really simple, and some people have already said it this morning. Whenever I try to start a conversation with a neighbor or someone else about shifting the cost of education from the property tax to the income tax, it's like the conversation just can't work. We can't have that conversation. And it seems incredibly, a brick wall. Why? Why can't we talk about that? And that's it. Thank you.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Flannel, Fleece, and Wool Club of Southern Vermont. My name's Mary Beth Porter, and I'm a teacher at Academy School. I live in Wardsboro, Vermont, but I am very invested in Brattleboro as well, because that's where I make my livelihood. I've been a teacher for a really long time. And one of the things I want to remind people about is when we have such a robust discussion as we've had for the last couple hours, sometimes it's like playing in a game and you lose track of who has the ball and where that ball is. And that ball is our kids. And I wanted to just make sure to invite anyone here to visit your local school. And in terms of measuring our success, measure it by what you see there. Measure it by the needs that you see demonstrated by the kids and how those needs are met by a kind word, a gesture from a teacher or another staff member, from a cafeteria worker in the lunch line, and from a janitor who has a little buddy to help mop the floor sometimes, because those are the many things we do to reach our kids and the needs that they display. So please, make an appointment, or at least make an effort to come into our local schools and spend an hour there and visit classrooms, visit librarians, visit art rooms, and measure our quality that way instead of from our VT CAP scores or our NAEP scores. I'm also a coordinator of our NAEP testing, and that's not a really great way of seeing the quality education our kids are getting. That's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
We have time for just one more question. Is that the last? Okay, yeah, and actually we are running out of time, so I'm gonna hold it. Okay, can it be really brief? I just want to, I'm sensitive to everyone's time.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to say, Steve Zaluzny, yeah, I appreciate that you people have run for office. I've never done that, so it's a difficult work, especially in these recent years. I wish that we had a little more diversity in our representatives from this area. I think there needs to be compromise in how we do things. I just see a lot of us against them or us against him. And I hope that, you know, we can try to come together, whether it's on local levels or whether it's in our federal government. That's an issue. Yeah, I'm a 69-year resident of this area. I don't live in Brattleboro, taxpayer, worked here forever. I'm in town every day. I'm going to jump around quickly, but I'll make it quick, Ian. You know, just different topics, you know, opiate money, you know, addiction problems in general. We need to stop people getting addicted. Once they're addicted, then it's a major problem. And, you know, we need to use some opiate money for that potentially. I know you're not necessarily representing that committee. I want to put that out there. You know, safety in the community. Wendy mentions in an article that people come to Vermont because young people are safe here. Recently, somebody on Valgar Street has on Facebook threatened to go to the school and with a weapon. You know, so people are concerned about that. I know people locally who have moved back to Vermont with young children. They are concerned about their safety, especially after something like this happening. So I'm wondering why you say that Vermont is a safe place to bring your children. There's a lot of people that I know locally that go to Keene with their children because they don't want to be on the streets here. Also, as far as safe injection sites, you know, we were told that the towns would have the final say on whether we have a safe injection site. And I respect your opinion on that. I really do. But we just want honesty. I want honesty in what's told to us and how it's represented to us. I can talk about those sites and see that, you know, they can save lives, but we don't know the statistics or the data on how many lives could be disrupted or lives lost at those centers. You know, we need to look at that before we consider doing these types of things. That's relevant. Emily, I talked to you at one point about the issues in town. You mentioned that Northampton does a better job in that regard, social services and so forth. I'm just curious about that. I think our town is not collaborating as a whole town as much as it should. So I just wondered whether you have time now or not, but I'm wondering what we could do better that way, because I don't think it's working as well. What is Northampton doing that's better that we could potentially adopt here? Just a couple more things and I'll be done here. But yeah, I think we need to do those things. I talked to Molly, unfortunately she's gone now, but you know, we talk about the people that are coming into our communities that and being serviced by social services and creating municipal costs. You know, it's sort of like that saying, Houston, we have a problem. We need to know who we're servicing because the costs are enormous now for our communities and for our state. That's a relevant topic. And how many people can we service? You know, it would be wonderful if we could service everybody that comes to us, but can we do that, and how do we regulate that, and how do we potentially change some of our regulations in that regard?
All right,
Steve.
Steve.
Yeah, one last thing.
One last thing, and then I want to thank our guests.
I think the biggest concern of the community is criminal activity in this town. As I said, this thing on Facebook is an issue of criminal activity. It's not what type of people are, whether it's myself, criminal activity, or somebody that has other issues in town. That is a big concern with us, and that we need to, you know, focus on criminal activity, not types of people that are in our town or whatever. That's the thing that needs to be improved to make our town better. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Steve. And, one of the tricky things with running one of these meetings is you want to try to provide an opportunity and a space to speak on one specific issue, which is what we were doing today, but there's tons of things that we want to talk about. And I appreciate, Steve, your comments. And
That's why I tried to wait
Let
till
me
the end.
finish. Thank you.
Yeah.
We'll make sure that we'll all hang out here for a minute afterward, and we can try to answer your questions individually. But I want to be respectful of the time of everyone who's up here and everyone who's here. I want to give a special thanks to our guests who have joined us to answer questions and listen to this testimony. I think it's really helpful. And everyone's busy, and I just really appreciate the time. So thank you very much. That's okay. Yeah. And finally, we will be having our next one of these on the first Saturday of March. I don't think we've landed on a theme yet, but we will figure that out and we'll put it out into the public sphere once we decide. It might have to do with sort of what's happening in Montpelier, but that makes it relevant. So look out for that on all of the different things. And then I want to finally thank the Brooks Memorial Library and Tara for helping organize all of this. Thank you. And then I also want to thank BCTV for making a recording of this possible today when I emailed them yesterday to make it happen. So I'm really grateful for that. And just put it out there that we're going to try to make sure that this is live streamed in March. So if you don't want to make your way through the snow to be here in person, you can at least watch it while it's happening and not wait for the recording to come out. So.